Captain Frederic John Walker carefully reads the operating instructions for the Royal Navy escort group, of which he's just taken command. His objective, they state, is, quote, the safe and timely arrival of the convoy. Walker takes a pen, crosses out the words, and writes new ones in their place, quote, our object is to kill. It's spring 1943, and as far as the 46-year-old captain is concerned, Britain has been fighting the Battle of the Atlantic all wrong. Navy doctrine states that escort ships are to surround the convoys, stay close, and wait for German U-boats to come to them. It's a defensive strategy, and it's not working. 3.5 years into the war, Britain is losing the merchant ships it desperately needs to survive at a rate so high it can't replace them fast enough. For nearly 2 decades, Walker, known to most as Johnnie, has been championing a more aggressive approach to anti-submarine warfare, but nobody at the Admiralty has wanted to hear it. Walker has been written off as too stubborn, too outspoken, too fixated on ideas that simply won't work. One report dismissed him as, quote, lacking powers of leadership. Passed over for promotion so many times that he was almost made to take early retirement. He was forced into land-based roles while enemy submarines tore through Allied shipping. In 1941, he was finally given a chance. During his first real command, he put his unconventional tactics to the test while escorting a convoy home from Gibraltar. Among them, a technique he developed called the creeping attack. One ship would hold sonar contact on a submerged U-boat from a safe distance, while a second would creep silently overhead without using its own sonar, dropping depth charges without warning. The U-boat crew hearing nothing until it was too late. Walker's escort group used methods such as this to devastating effect, sinking several U-boats. The Navy called it the first true Allied convoy victory of the Battle of the Atlantic. But then they sent him back to doing administrative work. Determined to get back on the water, Walker made a powerful ally in Admiral Sir Max Horton, the newly appointed Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches. With Horton's backing and the convoy situation becoming increasingly desperate, the Navy eventually agreed to give him another command. Now, he's been put at the head of the newly created 2nd Support Group, 6 modified Black Swan-class sloops, including his brand-new flagship, HMS Starling. Given a roving commission, his vision is clearer than ever, quote, no matter how many convoys we may shepherd through in safety, we shall have failed unless we slaughter U-boats. All energies must be bent to this end. As Starling leads the ships out to sea from Liverpool for the first time in May 1943, Walker blasts a song through her speakers, one that will soon become the group's signature, A Hunting We Will Go. Soon enough, their first target reveals itself. HMS Starling's radio operators intercept an enemy transmission. A U-boat has surfaced somewhere nearby and is broadcasting her position to her base in occupied France. On the morning of June 1st, U-202 is returning from her 9th War Patrol, one that began with a covert mission to land Nazi agents on the beaches of Long Island, New York. Walker immediately triangulates the signal, plots an intercept course, and orders the group to full speed. By mid-morning, Starling's sonar has found the German submarine. U-202 dives. Her captain, Gunther Poser, takes her to 500 feet, then 600, then 700, pushing far beyond her tested limits as the hull groans under the pressure. He fires decoys designed to fool Starling's sonar. He runs silent, cuts speed, and changes course repeatedly. None of it works. Walker, directing the hunt from a specially built platform on Starling's bridge, in white shorts and a cricket shirt, matches every move. At some point in the afternoon, he tells his officers, quote, I estimate this chap will surface at midnight. Either his air or his batteries will give out by then. Then he asks for sandwiches to be sent up. Inside U-202, the air is running out. Poser has taken her to 800 feet, far deeper than she was ever designed to go, the hull creaking and groaning under pressure that could implode it at any moment. His engineer is begging him to surface. There's nothing left to try. At 2 minutes past midnight, the tanks blow, and U-202 rises. She breaks the surface to find Starling waiting. Star shells tear the darkness apart. All 6 sloops open fire. Poser orders his crew to abandon ship, draws his revolver, intending to go down with his vessel rather than be captured. But when he turns to say goodbye to his officers, he finds they've already jumped. He dives into the sea after them, and is later pulled from the water alive. Walker had predicted the moment of surfacing to within 2 minutes. It is the product of knowledge, patience, and absolute certainty. Everything the Admiralty spent years telling him he didn't have. And it's the kind of wisdom that inspires complete dedication from his men. Those who served under Walker later say that if he'd told them to jump overboard, they would have done so without hesitation. Having drawn its first blood, the group returns victorious to Liverpool. On the dockside, the Starling noses into her berth. A staff officer pushes through the waiting crowd and jumps aboard, asking to speak to the captain alone. The staff officer's news is brief. He has news from the Mediterranean. Walker's eldest son, Timothy, who had been serving on the submarine HMS Parthian, is missing, believed to have been lost in combat. Walker says nothing. He finishes docking Starling. Only when the ship is safely alongside does he leave the bridge to meet his wife Eileen at the gangway, his officers doing what they can to hold off the multitude of people wanting to discuss business with him so the couple can have a private moment together. That evening, the wardroom has a long-planned dinner party. Officers and their wives, a celebration of the second support group's successful sinking of U-202. Despite the circumstances, Walker refuses to cancel it, attending with Eileen. At some point during the evening, one of the guests turns to her and asks how many children she has. She begins to answer, then she stops. The moment passes in a spate of chatter. Nobody mentions it again. There's no denying the bitter irony. A man who has spent his entire career obsessed with destroying submarines, and his son has perished on one. It's the kind of blow that does something to a person. But what it did to Walker, he never said. Within weeks, he's out hunting with Starling and the rest of the group again, this time in the Bay of Biscay. It's a stretch of water that every German U-boat operating in the Atlantic must cross. Outward bound from their bases on the French coast, homeward bound after their patrols. It's the perfect place to intercept them, and Walker hunts it with an unwavering aggression that his crews find difficult to keep pace with. The group ranges far from any convoy, looking for targets wherever they can be found. On June 24th, Walker spots one. U-119 has been forced to the surface by depth charges, surrounded by the group's guns. As she attempts to dive, Walker drives Starling directly into her, ramming her before she can get under, rolling her over and grinding across her hull. As Starling clears the stricken submarine, she finds a shallow pattern of depth charges. U-119 is gone. There are no survivors. But Starling has paid a price. Her bow is bent 30 degrees to starboard. Her sonar is destroyed. Her forward magazines are flooded. She is, for now, out of the fight. As she begins the slow journey home to Plymouth for repairs, Walker signals back to her, quote, "Goodbye, my gallant Starling. God be with you." Walker does not stop while Starling is temporarily taken from him. He simply finds another ship and continues. Through the summer of 1943, he ranges across the bay from HMS Wild Goose, then HMS Kite, pressing the group harder than anyone has pressed them before. On July 30th, an aircraft reports 3 U-boats on the surface simultaneously. 2 of them are Type 14 supply submarines, milk cows, vast vessels that keep the U-boat fleet operational by resupplying them with fuel and torpedoes at sea. From the bridge of Kite, Walker reaches for the signal flags and hoists a command almost never used to begin a battle. One made famous by Nelson at the Battle of the Nile. General chase. Every ship for herself. Full speed. Attack. The 5 sloops rapidly surge forward, guns trained on the targets. At 4 miles, they open fire. The U-boats, caught on the surface and unable to dive fast enough, are hit repeatedly. 2 are sunk by the group. A third, damaged and unable to submerge, is finished off by an Australian short Sunderland flying boat circling overhead. German survivors are left struggling in the water, but Walker signals that there's no time to stop, noting, quote, "It will do them no harm to contemplate nature while we do the hunting." He detaches one ship to collect them later. The group returns to Liverpool, to headlines and reporters. Walker retreats to his garden and leaves his officers to deal with them. By August, Starling has been repaired, and he's back aboard her, already thinking about where to look for prey next. Through the autumn of 1943, the patrols continue. Brutal, relentless, the North Atlantic at its worst. Storms that stop men sleeping, seas that can crack hulls and flood cabins, weeks at a time without a break. Respite finally comes when they pull into port at the American naval base at Argentia, Newfoundland. A U.S. Navy dance band is waiting on the dockside, playing A Hunting We Will Go. Walker spends his time ashore lecturing American and Canadian officers on his methods, which are already being adopted across the Allied fleet. The hunter-killer group he fought for years to be allowed to create is fast becoming an international template for anti-submarine warfare. On January 29, 1944, Starling leads the group out of Liverpool into the North Atlantic. 2 days later, on January 31st, they find U-592 running deep, trying to evade. Starling, Wild Goose, and Magpie close in together. Wild Goose's commander, David Weymouth, can hear on his hydrophones the rush of high-pressure air as the U-boat struggles to correct her trim under the assault. The depth charges keep coming. Eventually, debris and oil confirm what the hydrophones have already suggested. U-592 has been sunk. 8 days go by. Then, on the night of February 8th, Weymouth spots something in the moonlight. A U-boat periscope, less than 20 yards from his ship's hull. The U-boat's captain has apparently surfaced to take a look around, and found Wild Goose almost close enough to touch. Machine gun fire peppers the periscope before it disappears. Wild Goose gains some contact, directs Woodpecker in for a creeping attack, and U-762 is gone. In the early hours of the next morning, Weymouth's radar picks up another contact on the surface. U-734 dives before Wild Goose can open fire, but Weymouth holds sonar contact and calls Starling in for a joint attack. The U-boat survives the initial onslaught, but the damage causes her to leave a trail of oil wherever she goes. Starling and Wild Goose follow and strike again, finishing the submarine off. There are no survivors. Yet there's barely time to register it before a lookout on Starling's bridge shouts a warning. A torpedo wake is closing fast from astern. A German acoustic homing torpedo, drawn to the sound of Starling's propellers. There's no time for evasive action. Walker snaps out his orders. Hard to port. Depth charges set shallow. Fire. The depth charges detonate the torpedo, 5 yards from Starling's stern. Close enough to shatter every bottle in the wardroom. Starling shudders, steadies, and keeps fighting. The U-boat that fired it, U-238, proves a stubborn opponent. Eventually, Walker directs Magpie in for a hedgehog mortar attack, firing blind from 1,000 yards away, with no instruments to aim by. Somehow, 2 of the mortar bombs score direct hits. Walker describes it as, quote, a ghastly fluke. U-238 is the group's 3rd victim in just 15 hours. On February 11th, the group picks up another contact. The hunt for U-424 is the most frustrating yet. Sonar contact, lost and regained repeatedly. Every attack seemingly falling wide, the U-boat snaking freely through the deep. Apparently impossible to pin down. Eventually, Walker calls off the attacks. The group waits in silence. Then, from far below, the sounds begin. Weymouth, listening on his hydrophones, hears what he will later describe as something being gripped and crushed by a colossal hand. Metal buckling, air escaping, the unmistakable signature of a submarine breaking apart under pressure. Then silence. Then oil, rising slowly to the surface. U-424 is no more. Over a week passes with no further sinkings, until Walker finds U-264 lurking astern of a convoy on February 19th. The hunt that follows is long and grinding. Heavy seas, poor sonar conditions, attack after attack seemingly failing. Her captain, Captain Lieutenant Hartwig Lux, is equipped with a snorkel breathing device that allows him to stay submerged far longer than any previous target. But eventually, Walker's last creeping attack finds her. Lux accepts it is over. He then does something that Walker will later note with something close to professional respect. He surfaces, ensures every member of his crew gets off safely, then scuttles his vessel himself. All 51 men are pulled from the water alive. The tally of 6 U-boats sunk in 14 days is a feat unmatched before or since. But the patrol is not over. On the night of February 20th, a German acoustic torpedo finds HMS Woodpecker, one of Starling's sister ships, and a member of the group since the beginning. The blast tears off her stern. Starling takes her under tow. For 8 days, they fight to get her home, but the Atlantic has other ideas. In a gale off the Sicily Isles, the tow lines part. Woodpecker capsizes and sinks, not sunk by the enemy, but by the sea itself. All of her crew are saved. The group returns to Liverpool to find the First Lord of the Admiralty waiting on the dockside. Thousands line the docks to cheer them in. From the signal station, a flag flies with the message, quote, "Johnnie Walker, still going strong." That evening, Walker says quietly to Eileen, quote, "Isn't it funny? I'm still just the same old Johnnie. They didn't think it worthwhile to promote." In late March 1944, Walker is handed something he's never had before: command of an entire escort force. Convoy JW-58, bound from Murmansk, carrying supplies for the Soviet war effort, including the USS Milwaukee, a cruiser being gifted by President Roosevelt to Stalin, requires a 32-ship escort. Walker is given overall command of the support groups. A senior admiral, commanding from the cruiser HMS Diadem, initially attempts to direct Walker's ships onto conventional screening formation. Walker ignores him and operates independently. On the first day with the convoy, Starling finds U-961 and sinks her. The convoy arrives at Murmansk without the loss of a single ship. Milwaukee is handed over to the Russians as planned. Back in the Atlantic in May, word reaches Walker that a German submarine has sunk an American destroyer 200 miles away. U-473 could be anywhere within a vast radius of open ocean. Walker studies the charts, calculates where a U-boat captain in that situation would go, and heads straight there. He's right. The hunt that follows lasts 23 hours. When U-473 finally surfaces, the group tears her apart with gunfire. Walker signals his ships, quote, "Cease firing. Gosh, what a lovely battle." But the constant, obsessive hunting is having a noticeable effect on Walker's physical health. When Starling pulls into the docks at Liverpool, Eileen is shocked to find his frame has become gaunt, his face hollowed out, his eyes sunken. She will later describe being aghast at the toll being taken of his strength. He's been sleeping 2 hours a night, living in Starling's bridge, unable to stop, even when the ship is in port. He tells his wife, quote, "I stay on the bridge for as long as possible. I see the sailors looking up and know they're thinking it's all right. The old man's up there." It does give them confidence. Whether it's true or not, he certainly seems to believe it. Eileen isn't the only one worried about Walker's condition. Admiral Horton is concerned too, offering Walker 2 months of well-deserved rest as soon as the upcoming D-Day landings are done with. Yet Walker refuses to accept that he's wearing himself out. When the subject comes up, he retorts, quote, "I can stay on the bridge much longer than any of the young chaps." He's not wrong, but the cost is growing increasingly obvious to everyone but him. On June 6, 1944, the Allied armies land in Normandy. General Eisenhower has one demand of the Royal Navy: keep the English Channel clear of U-boats for 2 weeks while the beachhead is secured. Walker is given command of over 40 ships to make it happen. For 2 weeks, Walker barely sleeps. When Starling puts into port to rearm, his crew has a chance to recover in their bunks, but Walker stays busy with briefings ashore. Then Starling sails again, her crew rested, her captain not. His results are as excellent as ever. No U-boat gets through. Meanwhile, the Admiralty has plans for him. When his scheduled break is over, flag rank awaits. The command of an aircraft carrier, then a carrier task force in the Pacific. The Navy, that once nearly forced him into early retirement, has decided it cannot afford to let him go. But by now, Walker's condition is even worse than before. His first lieutenant discovers one morning that his captain has no memory of being woken in the night to deal with an emergency. No memory of the conversation, no memory of giving orders. Walker's speech is becoming hesitant. His officers notice him search for words that used to come instantly. On Starling's bridge, the lean figure that stood there through storm and battle and all-night hunts is becoming skeletal. On July 7th, Starling returns to Liverpool. That morning, 2 letters arrive for Walker. The first is from the Admiralty, official confirmation, nearly a year after he went missing, that Timothy lost his life on HMS Parthian. The second orders the second support group to sail the following morning. Walker reads both letters. That afternoon, he and Eileen go to see a film, Madame Curie. Walking home afterwards, he mentions that he feels dizzy. There's a strange humming noise in his head. By the time they reach the house, he's violently ill. Eileen calls the Naval Hospital. The doctors tell her not to worry. Her husband is exhausted. Rest will do the trick. But it doesn't. 2 days later, on July 9th, Captain Frederic John Walker passes away. He's 48 years old. The cause is recorded as cerebral thrombosis. The Admiralty's formal assessment is more direct. His passing was, quote, aggravated by and attributable to the conditions of his naval service. At 3 a.m., a signal is sent simultaneously to every ship of the second support group. They are already at sea, already hunting, already in Walker's favorite formation, line abreast, a mile apart. The news stuns them into silence. On Starling, the drills that have been carried out in crisp staccato precision become mumbled and slow. The grumblers go quiet. On July 11th, Walker's funeral is held at Liverpool Cathedral. Over 1,000 people attend. Thousands more line the streets as the gun carriage passes. The coffin is carried to the pier head and placed aboard the destroyer HMS Hesperus for burial at sea. As Hesperus sails down the Mersey, she passes between 2 convoys, one entering the port, one leaving. The merchant sailors on both sides, men Walker spent his life protecting, lower their ensigns and stand bareheaded. Admiral Horton delivers the eulogy, quote, not dust, nor the light weight of a stone, but all the sea at the western approaches shall be his tomb. 18 months later, in January 1946, HMS Starling is sold for scrap. She sinks under tow the following day, going down on the way to the breakers, in the waters she spent 3 years defending. In 1950, the Admiralty issues a formal statement, quote, Captain Walker, more than any other, won the Battle of the Atlantic. His methods had amazing success, and more than any other factor, gave the Royal Navy supremacy. It is only now that we have learned the full impact he had on the enemy. No tribute could be too high for the work he carried out. It is the verdict the Navy had spent years refusing to deliver. It arrives 6 years too late. The hunter-killer doctrine Walker fought to be allowed to practice, the idea that the job was not to protect convoys, but to destroy submarines, was adopted by every Allied anti-submarine force before the war was over, and remains the foundation of naval anti-submarine warfare to this day.